I may become a frequent flyer.
Sam, shut up.
Heck, I wouldn't mind some morphine every once in a while.
Oh my God.
My grandpa has to wear a morphine
Oh,
patch.
that's what you think. Okay,
Ew.
I don't think we made it to here. This is, when we talk about a CABG, a coronary artery bypass graft.
No, we didn't talk about that yet.
Okay.
You said you wanted to explain that.
Okay. So CAD, remember, is coronary artery disease, and that is where, when you look at your heart, okay, you've got all these blood vessels around the heart. We talked about that and how they feed the heart muscle, okay, and make it function. Well, coronary artery bypass, CAD, is where, you know, those blood vessels all get blocked, usually by like fatty plaques. Okay, well, when something gets blocked at 100%, you've probably all heard of some family member or somebody who says, oh, we have 100% blockage. Now they have to have open heart surgery. Okay, CABG, or coronary artery bypass graft, is open heart surgery. Okay, when people, that's kind of your typical, I mean, there's lots of different types of open heart surgery where they open up the chest and work on your heart. But this is what people usually say, oh, they had 100% blockage, they have to have open heart surgery. This is what they're talking about. Okay. Now, you've probably heard of people too say if they had a bypass, like a triple bypass or a quadruple bypass. Have y'all heard that before? Oh, wow, I didn't even know they would do 5 at a time. So, what they do in this is, so if those blood vessels right around the heart have gotten completely blocked, then you have to bypass them, okay? Bypass the blockage. So, for example, like let's say you got this blood vessel. It's kind of hard to tell with this little thing. Here, okay, if the blockage is way up here, then all the blood vessels that are past that blockage are not getting new blood flow, which means that those areas are not getting oxygen. And what do our cells do if they don't get oxygen? They die. So if a whole section of our heart muscle dies, that's a problem. Okay? That's not really going to function very well. So what they do is they bypass those blockages. So they actually go in, they take a blood vessel out of your lower leg, usually the lower leg. They actually take a blood vessel out of there and they bring it up to your heart and they reattach it. So they attach it up here at the aorta, which carries like freshly oxygenated blood, and then they attach it to that blood vessel beyond where the blockage is. So that's what this is supposed to represent, this little picture here. And that's what's on here. Turn off the light so you can kind of see it a little bit better. Okay, so on here, okay, so that's what they've done. These are the bypass grafts. So they take that blood vessel out of the leg, plugged it up here at the aorta, okay, which curves come around this way, and then plug it in beyond where that blockage is, and that restores blood flow to all of that area down below that.
That looks gross.
Now, determining the type of, like if they have a quadruple bypass, then they've had 4 different areas where they've had to do this. If they've had 5, then there's 5 different new vessels, new bypasses.
Can that be like bad for you? Like, can it end up being bad as it just improves the same?
I mean, it should improve because it's going to improve the areas beyond that. So, you know, should do that. Now this one has a pacing wire too. The node, the electrical node in your heart that actually sets the pace of your heart is up kind of on the top right-hand side. So that's that pacing wire up there.
That stays in your heart like that, in your body?
I mean, yeah. Now there's different types of pacemakers and all kinds of stuff that, you know, but anyway, but yes, it was there. So that's a bypass graft. That's what a CABG is, coronary artery bypass graft. And that's what that open heart is supposed to mean. Does that make sense? Isn't that crazy what they can do? It's just crazy. So obviously it's not really going to look this nice and neat that this one does. You know, this model looks, it'll look more like that, but it gives you a picture. Mine is broken. I got to glue it back together. Over here somewhere. Okay, interventricular septal defect. What does interventricular mean?
Between
Not inside. What did you say? Between the ventricles. Okay, everybody remember the ventricles are the two lower chambers of the heart. So if it's an interventricular, it's between the ventricles. It's a defect. It's actually a hole between the ventricles. Now, what issues would you foresee that having? Don't read the book. Just think about it. Right side of your heart holds what kind of blood? Oxygenated or deoxygenated? Deoxygenated. Left side holds oxygen. So if you have a hole between the two sides, yeah, all that blood's getting mixed. You've got your oxygenated blood mixed in with your deoxygenated blood. So they're going to have low oxygen all over. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have it's called hypoxia. Hypo is low, and then oxemia is blood, like oxygen in the blood. Remember, emia is blood condition, so it's a condition of low oxygen blood condition. So this is a cardiac abnormality that is usually found in newborns. It can close on its own, but sometimes it takes surgery. So there's lots of babies you hear about are born with holes in their hearts, and there's different places where those holes or kind of defects can be. Now, they can close up on their own. There's a purpose for this hole before that. Think about it. Babies in the womb, okay, they're not breathing yet, right? They don't breathe on their own. They get their oxygen from where? From the umbilical cord, right? From the mom. So all of the blood in the baby's system is a little bit deoxygenated by the time it gets there because it's the mom's blood. And so that hole has a purpose. Okay, blood is kind of shunted away from the lungs while the baby's still in the womb because it doesn't need to go to the lungs to pick up oxygen. Now, the lungs still need oxygen and it still needs that practice of moving blood along, but there's really no reason for all the blood to go to the lungs and then come back to the heart. It's just going to lose more of its oxygen that way. So some of the blood is gone ahead and it goes ahead into the left side so it can be pumped all over the body. That makes sense? So there's a reason for it, but it should close up by the time birth occurs.
Babies are weird. How is an umbilical cord formed?
Well, the umbilical cord is its attachment to the mom. So the placenta, which is on the inside of the amniotic sac, is actually its own organ. It's like a new organ that's produced during that time period, and that's what it's actually attached to.
Does it come out? Wait.
The placenta does.
I have a stupid question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the umbilical cord, do you cut it all off or you just shove it back in?
No, the umbilical cord is attached to the baby, but then it's attached to the placenta.
And
The whole
Oh, okay.
placenta comes out.
That's what I was thinking. Like, because isn't like called afterbirth or something like that?
That's a good question. Yes, it's called afterbirth.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
what I
that
thought.
the whole placenta.
I remember that.
Okay. The aorta, okay, we know the largest artery in the body, okay, it's the one that comes off the top of the heart. It arises from the left ventricle. We know that too, right? We all know the order of our heart. Don't forget that quiz. It's Tuesday. Flow of blood through the heart. Make sure you know the order in which it takes. And the aorta transports blood to cells all over the body. Okay? Pretty much all passes through the aorta. It's a really big, it's got a large diameter, so it's very large blood vessel.
Gosh, that scared me.
Okay, arterial diseases. Arteriosclerosis. We know sclerosis is what? Hardening. And arterio is artery, so that's hardening of the arteries. Hardening or thickening of the arterial walls that results in a loss of elasticity. Remember we talked about how our blood vessels should be able to like dilate and constrict as needed. Okay, well they lose their ability to do that when you have a buildup of fatty plaques. Or if you have high blood pressure for a long period of time, it puts lots of pressure on them, kind of makes them, stretches them out. It can cause an aneurysm. And an aneurysm is just an artery that has burst. Okay, or it balloons out. It doesn't have to burst, I'm sorry. It balloons out and the wall gets really thin and then the aneurysm can burst sometimes.
And those are fatal, right?
Yeah, well, depending on where it is.
In the brain they are.
It can be. I mean, usually, yes. So, but
Yeah, aren't you like candy?
But an aortic aneurysm particularly is almost always fatal. If it bursts, if it ruptures.
A rock and roll guy had an aneurysm and he lived.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Some
have an
poison.
aneurysm in the
Okay, Brett Michael.
aortic aneurysms
He died.
usually, the problem is people don't know that they have them
Lincoln's Spanish.
until, it ruptures, and then at that point, they bleed out too fast. Atherosclerosis, fatty plaques, this is like a hardening of those fatty plaques. So it's the same idea like we talked about the other day. Inside those blood vessels, you get fatty plaques. It's a buildup of cholesterol and fatty foods. They build up, they harden. Again, blood vessel walls can't move like they need to. Results in narrowed arteries and cause clots, and then can cause emboli. Remember, emboli is just like a moving foreign particle in the blood. It could be a blood clot, could be something else, but it's like if you have a blood clot in your leg and it moves up to your lungs, that's a pulmonary embolus. Okay, pulmonary embolus lung. Does that make sense?
Okay, embolize what?
Emboli is like a moving, it could be a clot or something else in your blood that stops blood flow.
Okay.
Okay, thrombosis is specifically a blood clot.
Okay.
Aneurysm, again, ballooning out of an arterial wall. We'll look at some in a minute. Caused by weakened arteries. It could be injury related. So something happened to the artery and caused the one area of that wall to be weak. Congenital defects, and those people are just born with them. Or it could be some kind of disease. Sometimes people can have multiple aneurysms. So, and again, and I'm sorry I said that a while ago, shouldn't have said it that way, but ballooning out is really an aneurysm, but aneurysms can rupture, cause mass bleeding, which can result in death.
Like a spleen or something?
Can rupture?
Yeah.
Yes, they can, but not necessarily an aneurysm. I don't think you can call that. Signs and symptoms, they may have some pain or pressure, but more times than not, there's no symptom for an aneurysm. And this, you hear about young people sometimes dying of aneurysms, and it's just like they just die. I mean, there's nothing, they don't know what caused it. They just, and then there's just no way to detect it unless you have some other issue and they detect it on accident, or if you happen to have some kind of symptoms. But the symptoms would be really vague. May not know if that's what it was. Usually found cerebral, so you can have cerebral aneurysms, brain, the abdomen, or the aorta. Now, usually in the abdomen, it's the abdominal aorta that would be your aneurysm. But treatment for them is surgery. That's pretty much the extent. If they find it before it ruptures, then you would have surgery. Okay, here's a normal aorta. If you're going up and down, so you can see the inside of the walls are really smooth looking. Blood would not get clotted up on there. Here's some diseased aortas. Okay, you can see the edges in here are really rough where that buildup has occurred, and blood cells are going to get hung up there. When they get clogged up in any particular part, they clot, okay, and impede blood flow. Here's severe arteriosclerosis in the aorta again. So it just kind of looks like almost meaty looking, okay, versus that normal one that was really smooth. Yeah. So, okay, myocardial infarction, or otherwise known as a heart attack. Myocardial muscle, okay, the heart muscle. Infarction is like an area that doesn't have good blood flow. So sometimes you'll hear that word not necessarily with myocardial. Okay, blocked coronary arteries cut off blood supply to the heart. So again, the coronary arteries are the ones that surround the heart, that feed the heart muscle. And an infarct is death of tissue due to decreased blood flow. So an area that doesn't have good blood flow that dies as a result of no oxygen. Okay, signs and symptoms of a heart attack or an MI. Nuptial abbreviation. Is that on y'all's list this week? Might be next week. Was it last week? MI or myocardial infarction?
No, we had that last week.
Oh, it was last week. So, signs and symptoms: chest pain or pressure. Okay, sometimes people will say they feel like an elephant sitting on their chest, or an intense pressure. It's going to cause them not to be able to breathe very well. Shortness of breath, sweating, clammy skin. They may be sitting there doing nothing, but they're sweating. Like their lip is sweating, or their forehead is beating up, even though they're not doing anything to make them sweat. Treatment, medications, if you get it early enough, oxygen, they're going to put lots of oxygen on them, and then anticoagulant, something that's going to cause, if it's a clot that's causing that area to have problems, they may give them some medicine that can thin their blood so that it can move past that. There's lots of medications that they can give, emergency type medications. Okay, congestive heart failure. You'll hear us talk about this quite a bit, or CHF. You've probably heard of a family member who has CHF, or congestive heart failure. This is not the kind of heart failure where you have to have, a heart transplant like the little boy in the movie you watched. This is a chronic disease as a result of the heart being overworked over long periods of time. Cardiac muscles are not strong enough to pump blood for the need of the body. So you think about it, if you've had high blood pressure for a long time, okay, your heart is having to pump really hard, right, against that pressure to pump blood. Well, it gets worn out over time. And it just loses its ability to pump really well. So signs and symptoms are edema, shortness of breath, cyanosis. What do you think cyanosis is? Cyan, where have you seen that before?
It's an abnormal condition.
It is, that's right. Osis is abnormal condition.
Cell.
Cyan is a color.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's like a reddish orange. Is it white?
It's blue, like light blue. Cyan is blue, like a light turquoise. Okay, cyanosis, so it literally means abnormal condition of blue. Okay, and that's what it is. It's blue skin, like blue, specifically around somebody's lips. Sometimes you'll see they get cyanotic, or their fingernails turn
Like
blue.
oxygen
That's
deprivation.
cyanosis. Do what?
That was caused by oxygen deprivation.
It is.
Like when you get cold or something, does that have anything that floods like your lips like?
Yes.
That's just your skin freezing.
But yeah, that's cold, and it makes sense because it's the same idea though. You have vasoconstriction, okay, in those particular areas. Well, vasoconstriction, your blood vessels constrict and get smaller to try to hold in heat. Okay, so especially in your fingers, lips, those areas are not going to get good oxygen level that way either. Okay, but this is particularly because your heart is not able to pump blood the way it needs to. Tissues are not getting oxygen the way that they need to. Okay, neck vein distension. Why do you think it would cause neck vein distension?
Because you're straining.
Potentially. Think through it a little bit more. Congestive heart failure. If your heart can't pump, do what?
It just builds up.
It builds up. Congestion. Think about same way traffic works. Okay, so if you've got a mix master and everybody's cars are going into this one spot, what happens to the traffic behind that? It gets backed up, right? It gets backed up. It gets backed up. Well, if the heart can't pump blood the way it needs to, blood then gets backed up. It's the same way. Well, it gets backed all the way up to the blood vessels in your neck. They're distended. They kind of stick out because they've got blood full. They're full of blood because it can't make its way through the way it needs to. Same thing with their legs. They get edema. It's not listed on here. Oh, yeah, it is. Edema. Edema is swollen feet and legs. Could be in the hands. Sometimes people get it in their belly. You may have a family member with swollen legs, and they put their finger in them, and they keeps their imprint. You ever seen that? Let me show you. I'll show you a picture of edema because I want you to see it for a second. Here's a perfect example. Okay, so this is edema. Now this one also has cellulitis, probably because of the edema. So they just swollen A lot of times you can tell somebody has edema, it'll be really shiny looking. Their legs will be kind of shiny because that skin will be really stretched out. But if you put your thumb or your hand on there, it will like stay imprinted for a few seconds. Okay, and there's different levels of edema, +1, +2, +3, all the way up to 4.
I have a question. So, like, edema, is it like kind of ashy looking? Like, you got
It can be because it causes really dry skin because of how it's stretched out their skin because it's so swollen.
So what is cellulitis look like? What are you?
Cellulitis is the red. It's an infection of the skin as a result of edema. Well, you can have cellulitis. It's just an infection of the skin. But a lot of times people get it as a result of edema. So, because some of that fluid, this isn't all just blood that stayed down here, but what has happened is because of the backup of blood, it's pushed like their lymphatic fluid, like the plasma in their blood and all that kind of stuff. It's pushed it out of the blood vessels and it just stays in the tissues. So that's what causes that edema. Now, pregnant women get edema a lot too, and a lot of that's just because pregnant women have an increased amount of blood supply when they're pregnant, like a lot, like increased a ton, and so their blood is still, they're pumping that through, but they get that same thing. It's like that swelling in their legs.
How do they treat that?
They take medicine that makes you get rid of extra fluid called diuretics. Take diuretics.
that's why some people get
So-
ashy with it.
Get what?
Like ashy, like flakes and stuff like that. They get
Well,
flakes.
it can, yeah, because it's like it just stretches out their
So how's it
skin, and so it dries it out because they're stretched.
I just think, ashy legs.
And then the diuretics make them lose fluid, so that can kind of dehydrate them too.
I don't want to spread no room. I'm just saying.
At Monica?
No.
I'm messing up your
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
you messing your skin? It's gonna stay there.
Where did it go?
Are you?
You hear what I said all the time?
So that is CHF, so treatment, meds to reduce fluid, like I said, with the diuretics. Okay, cardiac meds to help the heart contract better. So sometimes I'll take medicines that actually increase the contractility of the heart. It just makes it contract kind of more wholly, if you will, or like fully, like make it contract really well. Oxygen is something else that they may need more of. And then a low sodium diet. And here's why. Sodium makes you hang on to fluid. The more salt you eat, y'all ever heard family members say, if I eat all that salt, it's going to make my legs swell?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it does that because sodium kind of pulls water, makes you hang on to all of the water that you take in. And that's what it does. It goes down to your feet. Gravity pulls it that way.
Is that why pregnant women's feet swell?
Because, well, they have increased amount of blood flow anyways, like I said a while ago, so they're going to have more regardless. Okay, here is a picture of, this is kind of course, this person obviously is not alive. This is a cadaver's heart. Okay, but you can see the area down here where it died. This muscle died down here at the bottom. What's happened here is that this is all, your heart has a double lining too, kind of like we talked about with the lungs earlier. And so that lining here is separated and blood is pulled around there just because of the death, probably. But here is the area, this area down here, this is where the actual tissue death occurred.
Did they die from it?
I would assume that, but I don't know. I can't tell what this is. Myocardial infarction occurs when there's a thrombus in a coronary artery. And there's other things that can cause it too. But here's an aneurysm. Okay, so this is pretty large. This is a blood vessel and it's like ballooned out.
Oh my God.
Here's another aneurysm. So these are kidneys. This is the abdominal aorta. Okay, the aorta like curves up around the heart and then it just goes all the way down the body until it splits into the femoral arteries and or the iliac arteries, I think, and then it's femoral. So this is a ballooning out of that one right before it splits down here. You can see that's almost the same size as their kidneys. That one's huge. This has a dissecting aneurysm, and what that means is that this aneurysm has occurred it's caused the walls of the artery to separate. Okay, there's 3 different layers of your arterial walls. 3 layers, like an inner, middle, and an outer layer, so it's caused them to separate. That one's really hard to see. This one is a tear in the aorta.
Teachers and students, pardon this interruption for a quick announcement. This is just to let you know that there will be no JV or varsity baseball tournament on Saturday. Again, there's no JV or varsity baseball tournament